A request came by to talk about ways of using looks within ProPresenter 7. So in this live training, I'm actually going to cover how we use looks at our regional campus. We have a lot of ways we use looks at different campuses, but this one in particular uses some special looks I wanted to give you a quick look into. All right, so let's pull up our preferences, or actually you can see ProPresenter here. And I apologize you can't see my toolbar above, but I'm going to go into the Screens menu and I'm going to choose Edit Looks. That pulls up this Looks menu here. And just a real quick walkthrough of how these looks are different, what makes them unique. Our default look is indicating our screen 1. That's our main screens. At regional, it would be the 2 that are on the sides. We have also worship plus lower bars, and it seems like just looking at these right now, there's only one small difference between the default look and worship lower plus bars. We also have one called No NDI, one called Yes NDI, and one called Center Match. And as you can see, each of these also indicates slightly different things here. In this first column, we have screen 1. I already mentioned that, but that's the 2 screens that are on the side. NDI is our screen that actually sends to the center of the room. It sends it there by means of a network connection. It routes through our video switcher. The way it gets there is a little bit complicated, but just know that when we're talking NDI screen, we're talking about what shows on that center screen, if in relation to ProPresenter specifically. You can see over here in my multi-view that I've set up, NDI is only this little strip here and it's actually just showing the top of that screen. So each of these looks modifies things slightly different. I'm going to put that aside for a second. When I trigger a macro, that macro affects what look goes on our screens. So the macro for worship, you can see this this little, gosh, I guess it looks like eyes and a mustache. That indicates that there is an audience look that has been added to this particular macro, and that macro triggers something. So let's see if as I hover over top of this, it says Yes NDI. All right, so let's take a look again at our preferences. That worship macro triggers this Yes NDI option. And what that does, it sends everything to the screens on the side as you would expect it to see any other time during service. But on the NDI screen, that center screen, it is adding a very specific theme. And so if I were to click this, I can see the theme it's using is upper light. So we've created a theme, and that's very specific for that screen. In addition to the theme, it is also displaying slides and nothing else. So if I had a video input, it would never show on this screen because we've disabled that. So just know that the only change we're making is that we show a slide and it has a theme. Let's take a look at something else. For example, maybe the sermon bumper or the sermon macro. The audience look that it is using, if I hover here, it says that my audience look is No NDI. All right, so we'll bring that back up again. No NDI basically turns off everything in relation to that center screen, because during the teaching, a live teaching, we're not ever going to display anything from ProPresenter on that center screen. There is something displayed on that screen, but it comes from a different computer that we're operating that with. But as far as ProPresenter's output, it's never going to show something on that screen. That's why we've labeled it No NDI. Now there is another one in here called Center Match. We will use this if we are doing a playback service. So we've recorded the teaching in advance and we are going to be playing that back on our screens. That playback shows up on all the screens, and I can actually use this NDI control to show a full slide that might be like a title slide or some other graphic or whatever, but I can overlay that on top of the video playback that's happening on that center screen. The reason why I've labeled it Center Match is because I'm essentially saying I want the center screen to match exactly what's on the side screens. So anything that's overlaying with transparencies, it will overlay on that center screen just the same as it overlays on the side screens. The use case for that is when we have just sermon notes, and maybe during the recording we didn't add those notes in, and we wanted to add some lower thirds with the notes. We would use this to actually operate ProPresenter while the playback is happening, and our notes get added to the screen in that way. Now the one above here, worship, lower plus bars, I actually don't use that look anymore. We could probably remove it altogether, and then the default one we could as well. Really all that we're using for looks are these bottom three, and the only main difference between each of them is what theme is being put on the slide that goes to that center screen. So let me show you real quick in a worship slide. I'm going to go and click the first song, and it's just a blank slide, but as I select the first lyric slide of that song, you can see that it is actually showing on our side screens our lower third text, because we would have a video of whatever our cameras are showing, and this just overlays. And then on the center screen, just at the very top of the screen, you're going to see that we've got this particular formatted text. Now if I were to go to the sermon, and I'm going to select the slide that has the sermon macro, which would have changed our looks. When I go and I put the slide for the presenter's lower third, that lower third does show on our side screens, but as you can see, the center screen has now been turned off because that particular macro specifically turns off that center screen. Hopefully that makes sense as far as how the looks work. Looks can do so much more, but in our regional campus, this is the extent of how far we take our looks. There's not any need for us to do additional. Now at Northeast Campus, we've got some really creative looks over there because their screen format is quite different, and so it gets complicated there. But if you understand how it works here at Regional and just the ability of changing themes and so forth for a specific screen, those looks can be super powerful and you can use them elsewhere. So I hope that helps. Check back for more training, and we will continue to cover more topics in relation to this.